The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the quiet village of Umuaka. Life here moved at its own unhurried pace, where the rustling of palm fronds and the crowing of roosters marked the passage of time. It was a place untouched by the chaos of the bustling city, where tradition reigned supreme and every villager knew their neighbor's name and story. The villagers gathered under the ancient Iroko tree in the center of the square. Children played in the dust, their laughter echoing in the warm air, while elders sat on wooden stools, debating the wisdom of their forebears. It was then that a stranger appeared, walking barefoot down the red clay path leading into the heart of the village. He was a young man, tall and broad-shouldered, with skin the color of freshly roasted groundnuts and eyes that held a glimmer of mystery. His clothes were simple, worn, and patched in several places. Over his shoulder, he carried a small, freight sack that seemed to hold all his worldly possessions. The villagers watched him with curious eyes as he approached, his step steady but unhurried. "Who is that?" whispered Mama Nkechi to her friend, adjusting her wrapper. "He doesn't look like he's from around here." "No, he doesn't," agreed Papa Is, stroking his graying beard. "But let's see what he wants. Perhaps he has come to see the chief." The stranger stopped in front of the Iroko tree, set his sack on the ground, and bowed respectfully to the elders. "Good evening, fathers and mothers of Umuaka," he said in a deep, clear voice. "My name is Obina, and I have come to your village seeking refuge and work. The city has shown me nothing but hardship, and I hear that in the villages, people still value honesty and hard work." His words were humble, but his posture spoke of quiet confidence. The elders exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued. It was rare for a city man to leave the glittering allure of urban life for the simplicity of the village. Still, hospitality was a sacred duty in Umuaka. "Welcome, Obina," said Chief Okonkwo, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "We do not turn away those in need. You may stay here and make yourself useful. But remember, in Umuaka, we value truth and integrity above all else. The gods have a way of revealing deceit." "I understand, sir," Obina replied, bowing again. "Thank you for your kindness." And so, Obina was given a small hut on the edge of the village and a hoe to help in the communal farmlands. Despite his humble appearance, there was something about him that intrigued the villagers. He worked tirelessly from dawn till dusk, never complaining, and quickly earned a reputation as a diligent and respectful young man. It wasn't long before the women of the village began to notice him. His strong frame, quiet demeanor, and readiness to help others made him the subject of many whispered conversations. Mothers eyed him as a potential son-in-law, while young women found excuses to bring him food or pass by his hut. Among them was Adiz, the daughter of the village's most prosperous farmer. She was known for her beauty, with skin as smooth as the river's surface and eyes that sparkled like morning dew. But Adiz was also strong-willed and sharp-tongued, unimpressed by shallow flattery or idle talk. She had rejected more suitors than the elders could count, waiting for a man who would meet her high standards. One afternoon, as the villagers walked in the fields, a sudden downpour scattered them back to their homes. Obina and Adiz found themselves taking shelter under the same palm tree. The rain fell in heavy sheets, drenching the earth and filling the air with the fresh scent of wet soil. "You work hard for a city man," Adiz said, breaking the silence. Her tone was teasing but not unkind. Obina smiled. "And you speak boldly for a village woman," he replied, his eyes meeting hers. There was no mockery in his voice, only admiration. They talked as the rain continued to fall, their words weaving a connection that neither fully understood. By the time the storm passed and the sun reappeared, they parted ways with a shared glance that lingered longer than it should have. What neither Adiz nor the villagers knew was that Obina was not who he seemed. Beneath the tattered clothes and humble demeanor was a wealthy businessman from Lagos, a man who had grown disillusioned with the superficiality of city life. He had come to Umuaka in search of something real, a woman who would love him not for his wealth, but for the man he truly was. The arrival of Obina had stirred ripples in the calm waters of village life. Everywhere he went, people speculated about his past, creating stories to fill the gaps he deliberately left empty. Some said he was fleeing a terrible crime, while others believed he had fallen victim to the city's ruthless ways and was starting anew. For Adis, however, Obina's mystery was less important than the quiet moments they shared. Though their meetings were few and fleeting, she found herself drawn to his humility and sincerity. Yet, she kept her thoughts to herself, knowing her father, Nduka, would disapprove. Nduka was a man of means and influence, and he had already begun dropping hints about her marrying Chike, the son of a wealthy neighboring farmer. One evening, as the orange sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the fields, Obina sat outside his hut, sharpening his hoe. The rhythmic scrape of metal against stone was soothing, almost meditative. But his peace was interrupted by a soft voice. Obina. He looked up to see Adis standing a few feet away, her wrapper tied loosely around her waist, her arms folded. Adis, he said, rising to his feet. What brings you here at this hour? She hesitated, glancing around as if ensuring no one had followed her. I've been thinking, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. About you. About why you're here. Obina's expression softened. What is it you wish to know? Why would a man leave the city to toil in a village? What are you running from? Her gaze was piercing, searching his face for answers. He sighed, setting the hoe aside. I am not running, Adis. I am searching. The city, it's full of noise, of people chasing shadows. I wanted something real, something pure. The kind of life people like you have here. She studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. And have you found what you're looking for? He met her gaze, unflinching. Perhaps I have. Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of a drumbeat. The village square was coming alive with music and chatter. A celebration was underway. Adis turned to leave, but Obina's voice stopped her. Adis, he called. Be careful of those who would make decisions for you. The heart knows its own path. Her heart skipped a beat, but she did not look back as she walked away. As night fell, the celebration in the square grew louder, but Obina stayed in his hut, lost in thought. He knew the life he had built in Umuaka was fragile, and he dreaded the day when his secret would come to light. Morning in Umuaka arrived gently, with the cooing of doves and the soft rays of sunlight filtering through the thatched roofs. The air was thick with the smell of fresh earth, as the villagers prepared for another day of labor in the fields. Obina rose before dawn, as he always did, carrying his tools to join the other farmers. Yet today, an air of unease clung to him, an invisible weight pressing down on his shoulders. The celebration of the previous night had left the village abuzz with stories and gossip. Adis' presence had been missed by many, and it wasn't long before questions began to arise about where she had been. Though no one dared to confront her openly, whispers carried from one hut to another like the rustling of leaves in the harmattan wind. As Obina walked alongside the men, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Papa is, known for his sharp eyes and sharper tongue, seemed particularly interested in Obina's movements that morning. He approached, leaning on his staff, his expression curious but unreadable. Obina, Papa is called, his voice cutting through the rhythmic chopping of hoes. You work hard, like a man with something to prove. Obina paused, wiping sweat from his brow. In Umuaka, every man must earn his place, he replied evenly. I am no exception. Papa is nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on Obina. True. But every man also carries his story. And yours, young man, is yet untold. Obina offered a polite smile but said nothing more, resuming his work. The exchange was brief, but it left Obina feeling exposed, as if the village elders were beginning to peel back the layers of his carefully constructed disguise. Meanwhile, Adis was having her own struggles. Her father, Nduka, had noticed her growing distance and was determined to address it. That evening, as the family gathered for their meal, Nduka's booming voice filled the room. Adis, he began, fixing her with a stern gaze. I have heard whispers that you have been speaking to that stranger, Obina. Is it true? Adis set her wooden bow down, her jaw tightening. I have spoken to him, yes. But what of it? He is a good man. Nduka's face darkened. A good man. What do we know of him, really? He could be a thief, a fugitive, or worse. I will not have my daughter's name tied to a man whose past is a mystery. He works hard and asks for nothing but honesty, Addis countered, her voice firm. Can you say the same of Chike, the man you want me to marry? Nduka slammed his palm on the table, silencing her. Enough. You will not speak ill of Chike. He is from a good family, and he will provide for you. This discussion is over. But in her heart, Addis knew it was far from over. She excused herself from the table, retreating to her room where she sat by the small window, staring out at the moonlit fields. Her mind drifted to Obina's words, the heart knows its own path. She wondered if her heart would lead her to ruin or to something worth fighting for. As the days passed, tension in the village grew. Obina noticed the change in the way people looked at him, how conversations seemed to stop when he approached. Even the children, who had once greeted him with laughter, now watched him warily. It was clear that the villagers were beginning to question his presence among them. One fateful afternoon, as Obina returned from the fields, he found Chief Okonkwo waiting outside his hut. The elder's expression was grave, his arms crossed over his chest. Obina, the chief began, I have always believed in offering hospitality to those in need. But I must ask you now, as the leader of this village, who are you, truly? And why have you come to Umuaka? Obina's heart pounded in his chest. He had prepared for this moment, but now that it was here, he felt the walls closing in. Taking a deep breath, he met the chief's gaze. I came to Umuaka seeking peace and purpose, he said carefully. The city life left me hollow, and I wanted to find a place where I could rebuild myself. Chief Okonkwo studied him for a long moment before nodding. If that is true, then you will have nothing to hide. But understand this, Obina, the truth has a way of surfacing, whether we wish it to or not. That night, as Obina lay on his mat, he realized that his time in Umuaka was running out. The villagers were no longer content with his silence, and the longer he stayed, the greater the risk of his secret being revealed. Yet, when he thought of leaving, his mind always returned to Addis, the woman who had begun to awaken something in him that he had. Yet, Obina went about his routine as usual, tending to the fields and fetching water from the river. He knew the villagers were watching, their curiosity turning to suspicion, but he also knew he had no choice but to stay the course. In the distance, Addis was walking back from the market with a basket of yams balanced expertly on her head. She noticed the sidelong glances of the women she passed, their hushed murmurs barely concealed. Poor Addis, they said, letting herself be charmed by a man who hides in shadows. Addis' jaw tightened, but she refused to let their words affect her. She had spoken to Obina only a handful of times, but in those moments, she had seen a man of integrity, a man unlike any she had known before. Whether the villagers understood that or not, she didn't care. The dawn broke over Umuaka, painting the sky in strokes of soft orange and pink. The village was waking to another ordinary day, or so it seemed. The roosters crowed, the women prepared for the day's market, and the men gathered their tools for the fields. But this day would be anything but ordinary. As the villagers went about their routines, a low rumble echoed in the distance. It grew louder until, finally, a convoy of sleek black cars emerged from the red dirt road leading into the village. The vehicles gleamed in the sunlight, their arrival sending ripples of shock through the villagers. Children ran to the roadside, pointing excitedly, while the elders exchanged worried glances. Who could it be? A government official? A wealthy trader? The convoy stopped in the village square, and from the lead car, a sharply dressed young woman stepped out, her heels clicking against the ground. She was elegant and commanding, her fitted suit a stark contrast to the villagers' simple attire. The crowd murmured as the woman scanned the square, her eyes landing on Obina, who stood frozen by the communal well. Mr. Obina, she called, her voice firm yet familiar. Obina's heart sank. His secret was unraveling faster than he could contain it. Slowly, he walked toward her, the villagers parting to let him through. Amoka, he said, his tone measured but tense. What are you doing here? I've come to bring you back, she said, her voice softening. The office is in chaos without you, and your absence has left too many questions unanswered. You've been gone long enough. The villagers gasped. Office, someone whispered. Who is he really? Obina turned to face the crowd, his jaw tightening as the weight of the moment bore down on him. He knew there was no way out now, the truth had to be told. My people, he began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest, I owe you all an explanation. I am not just a simple man seeking work. My name is Obina Okofor, and I am the owner of a large business in Lagos. I came here not to deceive you, but to find what I had lost, the values of humility, hard work, and genuine connection. The mamas turned to stunned silence. Even Chief Okonkwo, seated under the Iroko tree, looked taken aback. I hid my identity because I wanted to be seen for who I am, not for what I have, Obina continued. And in this village, I found something real, something I could never find in the city. His eyes shifted to Adiz, who stood at the edge of the crowd, her face unreadable. Gathering his courage, he took a step toward her. Adiz, he said, his voice softening, you taught me the meaning of strength and sincerity. In the short time I've known you, you've shown me a kind of love and honesty I've never experienced before. I came to Umuaka searching for something real, and I found it in you. Obina dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a simple yet elegant diamond ring that sparkled like the morning dew. Adiz, he said, his voice filled with emotion, will you marry me? Not because of who I am or what I have, but because of the life we could build together. The crowd held its breath, all eyes on Adiz. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she stepped forward, her lips curving into a smile. Yes, Obina, she said, her voice steady but brimming with joy. I will marry you. Cheers erupted from the villagers, their initial shock giving way to celebration. Even Chief Okonkwo smiled, nodding his approval. The gods, it seemed, had orchestrated this union, bringing together two souls from different worlds. The wedding was a grand affair, blending the traditions of Umuaka with touches of the city's sophistication. Obina insisted on honoring the customs of the village, and Adiz's family proudly gave their blessings. The entire village came alive with song, dance, and feasting that lasted for days. After the ceremony, Obina and Adiz climbed into one of the waiting cars, the villagers gathering around to bid them farewell. Adiz looked back at the place she had always called home, her heart full of gratitude and excitement for the future. Are you ready for city life? Obina asked, taking her hand as the car began to move. With you by my side, she replied, I am ready for anything. As the convoy disappeared down the red clay road, the villagers returned to their lives, their hearts warm with the knowledge that one of their own had found love and happiness. In the city, Obina and Adiz began their new life together, bringing the values of Umuaka into their modern world. Though they lived in luxury, they never forgot the lessons of humility, honesty, and love that had brought them together.